What's up, everybody? This is your host, Sam. This is where stats meet instinct. Welcome back to another episode. Today, we're going to dig into prospects a little bit. MLB.com came out with their top 30 prospect list for the A's for the 2026 season. This is just kind of one of those things I like to nerd out over. I've also found myself in recent years watching a lot more minor league baseball. It just kind of allows me to watch players, scout them a little bit, and just kind of see where they're at in the development process. So I love watching minor league baseball. I've watched a decent amount of it over the last few years. So I'm going to talk about some of the guys that stand out to me on this top 30 prospect list. Some of the guys I really like, some of the guys I just want to talk about a little bit. And I'm going to give you guys kind of my thoughts on those players, what they do well, what they still need to improve before they become impact big leaguers. And I'm also going to give you some comps of like current major league players that I think these guys are similar to. Now, with comps, I think it's really easy to say you're comparing this guy and saying he's as good or going to be as good as this player. That's not what comps really are. Comps are basically comparing players that fit a similar mold to a certain big leaguer or a similar archetype to a certain big leaguer. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about the top 30 prospect list as a whole a little bit as well. So we'll get started right there. To start with, this top 30 prospects is really fun because this is the first time in a long time I really feel like the pitching is a little bit ahead of the hitting from the A's prospect standpoint. And that hasn't been the case in years. The A's have done a really good job of developing hitters in their recent history. But the pitching side of thing, especially in like from about 2020 to 2023, really lagged behind the offense. And now you're seeing kind of some of the results of that in the major leagues. You see the offense at a really good point, and you see the pitching staff kind of lagging a little bit behind. I think that's really flipped in the last couple of years. The A's are still doing a good job developing hitters. That's kind of their strength as an organization. But they've done a much better job, specifically in the last couple of years, of developing pitchers. And that's starting to show up on that prospect list. And, you know, we're hoping that's obviously going to translate to the major leagues sooner rather than later. But you love seeing like the big three lefties at 2, 3, and 4 on the list in Arnold, Jump, and Lin. Those guys have really bright futures. And then the A's have a lot of guys after that have a good chance of being starting pitchers in the major leagues. Maybe not front of the rotation, ace-type starters, but innings eater, mid to bottom of the rotation type starters, and those are really good to have as well. So we're going to touch on some of those guys. From the offensive standpoint, it's kind of Leo and then Bolte and then everybody else, kind of in my opinion, from the offensive standpoint. And part of that's just because so many of their guys have graduated recently. You have Jacob Wilson, you have Nick Kurtz. When guys get to the big leagues so fast, they're not going to spend a lot of time on prospect lists. So the A's have a bunch of young hitting talent in the big leagues, not as much on this top 30 prospect list, but that's expected just based on how quick some of these guys are graduating. So I'm going to start by talking about everybody's favorite prospect right now, Leo DeVries. He's in big league camp. He's doing some good things in big league camp. And he's obviously the headliner of one of the biggest trades the A's have made in the past few years, headlining the Mason Miller trade. Prospects in the top 10 like of Major League Baseball rarely ever get traded. So this was a shock to most people when this happened, including myself. I was shocked a prospect of this caliber got moved because that almost never happens anymore, especially mid-season. And ever since then, we've all been penciling Leo into the future Las Vegas lineup, whether it be at third or short or second, whatever. We've all been doing that. So I kind of want to talk about him a little bit. I do think there's quite a few misconceptions about him as a player. So we're going to get into some of those. And we're going to kind of talk about what he does really well and then what he might need to improve to actually reach that impact ceiling that we all believe that he has. So to start with, Leo gets comped to Francisco Lindor all the time. And that's like everybody who gives a comp typically throws out Francisco Lindor. I don't really like that comp at all. And I have a different comp that I think is a better fit for the player. But a lot of times people see a top 10 prospect in baseball. He's 18 years old or 19 years old now, but played last year at Double A at 18 years old. And they assume like he's this freak athlete. And that's really not what what Leo is when you watch him consistently. He's more of a guy that's polish over tools, and that's what allows him to have success at higher levels than most players his age would have. But if you're looking for like a super plus runner with elite raw power and gold glove defense at shortstop, that's really not what he is. And I think a lot of people just look at the profile and kind of assume that's what he is. But what he actually is when you watch him is a little bit different. So I would say he's an average runner. And you saw this in spring training the other day. He had a chopper, I think it was to third base from the left side. And he got thrown out by a step. And you kind of watch that in like internal clock. You're like, all right, a plus runner beats that out. Like if Henry Bolte is running down the line, there might not even be a throw on that. And Leo gets thrown out by a half step. So he's not a guy that is going to be a burner, right? And that doesn't mean he can't steal bases. That doesn't mean he can't be good defensively. But he's just not straight line speed elite as a runner. He's a lot closer to average. From a raw power standpoint, too, he's more average than plus. He's not this guy that's going to hit the ball 115 miles an hour. He's a guy that has done a good job of consistently putting the bat on the ball. But again, the exit velos aren't massive. The raw power is not massive. You're not going to see this guy hit a 450-foot home run this year, more than likely. Now, he does some things that allow that power to play up. And obviously the big thing here is like, well, there's projection. The kid's 19 years old. So over time, he's probably going to grow into more power. He's going to get stronger. And that power is probably going to go from average to a little bit above average. But this isn't a guy you're going to see do what Nick Kurtz does, where he's hitting 450-foot home runs all the time. This is a guy with more average power that's going to play a little bit above that. And then from a defensive standpoint, he has a really strong arm and his actions are really good. Watching him in spring training the other day, he was making some plays look easy that were difficult. But he's a little bit like Jacob Wilson in that he's not super rangy. So that combined with the fact he's 18 years old and there's probably some growing still to do and some filling out still to do is why some people don't project him as a shortstop. I think he's going to be a shortstop moving forward, but I don't think he's going to be a plus defender at shortstop. I think he's going to be like a league average shortstop, which is incredibly valuable. I don't want to undersell that. But that's where I think the Francisco Lindor comp starts to break down a little bit. Because when Francisco Lindor was coming up, he was like a glove first, can't miss, no doubt, gold glove shortstop. And he was super toolsy and super fluid. And you don't quite see that from Leo. But what Leo does really, really well is, and this is going to sound super simple, but it's really not, he separates balls from strikes as well as any 18 or 19-year-old I've ever seen. So he basically swings at strikes and he doesn't chase out of the zone very often. So what does this mean? It means he gets himself into positive leverage counts and he's swinging at pitches he can do damage on. And on top of that, he tends to hit fly balls to the pull side, which can allow average power to play above average in games just because you're maximizing your contact. That combined with an elite approach is why I think the floor on Leo is so high, why he's almost no doubt an everyday regular big leaguer, because he's going to be able to maximize what power he has. He's going to take his walks, but he's also going to do damage when pitches are in the zone. He's a switch hitter, which means he should be okay against both righties and lefties. I actually like his right-handed swing a little bit better than his left-handed swing. I don't know what the numbers are right versus left, but he's a guy that I think will be able to hit from both sides of the plate, and he's going to be able to maximize his contact. He's going to be able to take his walks. The other thing with him too is he does have some holes in his swing and in his just overall setup right now. But you're not going to find a 19-year-old that doesn't have holes in their swing. That's just what it is. For him, it tends to be like fastballs letter high. He tends to swing through that quite a bit. And that's something he's going to have to fix before he makes the jump to the big leagues, or at least as he works his way closer to the big leagues. But again, he's 19 years old. I'm not super worried about minor holes in the swing right now or pitches that beat him, because you're not going to find a 19-year-old that doesn't have those same type of issues. But he's great at recognizing pitches. You don't see him chase breaking balls out of the zone very often. You see him stay back on breaking balls. You see him stay back on changeups. He does a good job of hitting velo. And all these things, this elite approach from such a young kid is why it's like, okay, there's a really good chance this is a 260 hitter in the big leagues with a high on base percentage and 25 home runs and the ability to stick at shortstop. And if you have that, you have a franchise cornerstone. Like, that is a very, very good baseball player. From a WAR standpoint, that's like a 5-win player a year, which is a guy like that you can build your team around. I don't think he has necessarily like that absolute superstar potential that I think some people think he does, where it's like, you know, he's a 40 home run shortstop, or he's a guy that's going to hit 320, or he's a guy that's going to win a Gold Glove at shortstop. I don't really see that from him, just because I don't think the tools are going to be quite enough, but I think he's going to maximize those tools. He has this moxie. He has this presence about him. He's not scared of anything. And I think that's going to allow all of that stuff, all of his ability to be maximized. My comp for him is Kade Morris from the Diamondbacks. This has been my comp for him for a long time. I think I heard somebody actually use this for the first time, like fairly recently in the A's organization. But the reason is Kade Morris is a very polished player. He started out as a shortstop. He's ended up kind of settling in at second base. At this point in his career, he's kind of a bigger bodied second baseman, which is kind of how I see Leo eventually looking when he's, you know, in his early 30s. He hits from both sides of the plate. There's no real holes in his swing. The approach is really, really good. He's solid defensively, but he's not this guy that relies on just elite athleticism and elite tools. Now, Marte does hit the ball really, really hard, probably harder than I would guess Leo's going to hit it, but they're very similar in terms of just where I see the future being. And I think Kade Morris is kind of the ceiling for Leo. Like, if you get a guy like that, that's one of the best offensive players in baseball. So that's a pretty high comp. And it's going to take a lot for Leo to get to that point. But I think that's the guy when I look at both. It's a guy that relies on polish a little more than tools, is a switch hitter, is a big-bodied infielder that plays really solid defense. That's, I think, the future ceiling for Leo, and I think that's the comp that I would go with there. But again, Leo's not this super, super toolsy athlete. He has good tools across the board that he combines with a really, really, really good approach for his age, and then just that moxie and that makeup that allows everything to play up a little bit beyond even what the tools say. So he's a guy, obviously, I'm excited about. Is he going to play short, or is he going to play third? I think or second, I guess. I think that's the question, because right now they have Jacob Wilson at short. I think part of that depends on when he comes up. I think if he spends all of this year in AA or AAA, but the A's plan is to have him kind of be on the roster starting next year, I think there's a better chance you see him at shortstop. If he comes up this year, I don't think you're going to move Wilson off shortstop mid-year. So I think if he comes up this year, you're probably going to see him at third or second, and it would be really, really late in the year. Long term, I see him as a little bit better of a shortstop than Wilson. So I would kind of hope that he's playing short and Wilson slides to either second or third. But obviously Wilson can improve his defense too. And then all of a sudden you slide Leo over to third. His bat's going to profile there. I think regardless, it's going to work. Another guy I want to touch on, and this is the guy, if you follow me on Twitter, I talk about more than any other A's prospect, and that's Wei-En Lin. He's ranked as the A's fourth best prospect overall. He's one of the big three lefties in my mind. You hear a lot of people talk about Arnold and Jump, and for good reason. But Wei-En Lin to pitching is a lot of what Leo is to offense for the A's and in their system. Wei-En Lin made it to AA at 19 in his first year of professional baseball, which is incredibly, incredibly rare. And like Leo, he kind of relies on polish over tools at this point in his career. He's a guy that can touch in the mid-90s, but most of last year was kind of lower to mid-90s. But he has 4 pitches. He's an extreme strike thrower for a 19-year-old, and he's got all that other stuff you look for in a young pitcher. He's got that build where he's going to fill out a little bit, probably add some more velocity. He's got that composure. He's got that moxie on the mound. He's got athleticism to him. And if this guy goes from throwing, 91 to 93 to consistently throwing 94 to 95, I think this is a really, really solid mid-rotation starter with even maybe a little bit more upside than that. And that's why I kind of group him with Jump and with Arnold, is I just think this guy has all of the ingredients already from a pitchability standpoint at such a young age. And that means there's really likely to be a jump or a tick up in stuff. And if that happens, he's going to be a really, really good major league pitcher. And again, he's also just like Leo because he's a pitchability guy. The raw tools aren't the thing that makes him successful. It's his ability to command the baseball. It's his ability to maximize the stuff he has currently. And again, a 19-year-old in Double-A, that is incredibly rare, especially in his first year in professional baseball. And I mean, he only threw 6 innings in Double-A, but he held his own at that level. I think his ERA was right around 4. So this is a guy I'm super, super excited about. I think he can be a big part of their future. And looking for comps for him, I was thinking about kind of lankier left-handed pitchers that rely more on command than stuff, but still have really good stuff. And the archetype for that, I think the easiest comp is Max Fried. Now, I don't think Wei-En Lin's ceiling is as high as Max Fried. I think Leo's ceiling might be as high as Kentel Marte. I don't think Lin's ceiling is quite as high as Max Fried. But that's the style of pitcher I think Lin definitely fits into. And so he's a guy I'm really excited about. He's going to pitch in the World Baseball Classic, pitch under the bright lights. That's going to be a great experience for him. He'll start out the year probably in Double-A. I would like to see him spend most of the year in Double-A. But again, if he outperforms that level and shows he's too good for that level, like the A's have shown a willingness to move prospects quickly when they show they're ready. I'm not going to put anything past this guy because if you had told me he was going to be in Double-A last year, I probably wouldn't have believed that at the start of the season. But this is a guy I'm really excited about. I wanted to give him a little bit of love on the show because I think Gage Jump, Jamie Arnold get a bunch of it. He's kind of the forgotten man, but I view him in that same tier as those other 2 left-handed pitchers. The next guy I want to talk about is Tommy White because he's another guy I think is just misunderstood as a prospect. And he's a guy that is a really popular prospect in the A's organization because he had such an elite college baseball career. Now, one thing about Tommy White, this is not a guy that's power over hit anymore. He's a hit over power guy. And he kind of started transitioning that way a little bit towards the end of college. But now in pro ball, he's definitely been a guy that is more of a hit over power. Like, I don't think this is a 40 home run guy. I don't know even if this is a 30 home run guy. I think this is more a 20 to 25 home run guy that's going to hit for a decent average. He doesn't walk a lot and he doesn't strike out a lot. Typically, when you see guys that don't walk and don't strike out, it means they swing at everything. And I think that's the case with Tommy White. Obviously, you're not going to walk as much if you swing at everything, but you're not going to strike out as much either because if you swing at 3 pitches during an at-bat instead of 1, the odds of you putting one of those 3 in play is a lot higher than putting that 1 in play. So guys that swing at everything basically don't strike out as much, but that's not necessarily a good thing. I do think this guy has special hands at the plate. They're explosive. He can hit the ball to all fields. That part of his game is great. I do believe in the bat. I think there's a big league bat in there. The issue is I don't think there's really any way he plays third base on a regular basis. And the A's have kind of boxed themselves in by locking up a bunch of guys at corner positions. And that's not a bad thing because all of those guys are highly productive. But you have first base locked up for a long time with Kurtz, even if he doesn't sign an extension. You have Rooker, who signed an extension at DH. So there's no first base reps. There's no DH reps. Those are the 2 spots Tommy White would fit the best. Then you have left field and right field locked up for a long time. And so you can't really bring up any bat first prospects anymore and give them regular playing time. You're going to have to bring up guys that can play a premium position because all the bat first positions are pretty much spoken for at this point. So I don't see a long-term fit for Tommy White on this roster. Obviously, if someone gets hurt, he can play a little bit. But I just don't see enough range on defense. I think you have a big enough sample size of him on defense where it's like, it's really bad. Maybe it can get to below average instead of terrible. But, I mean, do you really want a below average third baseman when you have some other positions that struggle defensively as well? I don't think so. And is he going to hit enough to make it where, playing a below average third baseman every day is what you want to do? I don't know about that. Long term, I see him as a guy that's going to play first base or DH. I don't think that's going to be with the A's, honestly, because I just don't see that spot opening up for him in the A's organization. My comp for him is Yandy Diaz from the Rays, kind of a shorter, stockier first baseman, right-handed hitter, came up with the idea of playing third, but has basically been a first baseman DH for the majority of his career. He's a guy that's hit overpowered. Now, he'll hit 20 home runs a year, but he's a guy that'll hit for a high average. That's kind of what I see Tommy White being, is a guy that hits about 20 to 25 home runs, but hits for a pretty good average. Now, Yandy Diaz walks more than Tommy White. He's not as much of a free swinger, but I see that as probably the best comp for Tommy White, at least that I could come up with there. But yeah, he's a guy I wish there was more of an opportunity for in the organization, but I just don't see how that's going to develop moving forward. Another guy I want to talk about on this list, just because I don't think many people talk about him, including myself. I haven't really talked about him a ton, but I do think there's a good chance he impacts the major league team this year, and that's Cade Morris. Cade Morris was ranked 12th on this list, which initially when I saw that, I was thinking that was a little high, but the more I thought about it, the more I kind of liked that spot for him on the list. This is a guy, obviously the A's got him in the Paul Blackburn trade, and he kind of has this reputation of being a guy where he's more command over stuff. But I do think the stuff is a little bit underrated. And what I like about this guy is he really profiles as the type of pitcher that can have success in Sacramento or in Vegas moving forward, in these hitters' parks that the A's are probably going to play in, because Vegas is probably going to be a hitters' park as well. He fits the type of guy that can have success in these type of yards. So it's a mid-90 sinker as probably his best pitch. He gets ground balls. He has 7 different pitches. At least that's what it said on MLB.com. I've seen the slider look pretty decent at times, but he's a guy that can manipulate the baseball a lot of different ways. He throws a lot of strikes, and he threw a lot of innings in the minor leagues last year. He threw 150 innings in the minor leagues last year. So this year, it's not a stretch to say he can throw 180 innings. Like, there's not going to be an innings limit on this guy. And the knock on him was he struggled early on in Vegas last year in AAA, but when you look at the overall numbers, he finished with a 5.22 ERA. For your first go-around in such an offensive environment like the PCL, I think that's actually pretty good, especially for the amount of innings he threw and how he started out. You could see him adjust to that level. And what people forget is he dominated AA last year. So this is a guy that I think has a chance to work his way into the back end of the rotation and be an innings eater that becomes a really valuable piece for the A's. He's a guy where I don't think there's the upside of like an ace or a frontline starter. But again, a guy that eats innings at the back of a rotation is really, really valuable. And this guy's also a competitor too. Like, you watch him on the mound, he does have a presence about him. He has a moxie about him that you really, really like from your pitchers. And he doesn't strike me as the type of guy that's going to be scared of facing big leaguers when he gets to the big leagues. So he finished the year with a lot of momentum. He started the year with a lot of momentum. That time in the middle, he kind of struggled, but you want to kind of see that from your prospects. You want to see them struggle and you want to see them work through that. And that's what he did. So my comp for him is Kyle Gibson, the pitcher for the Twins and the Rangers and Baltimore for a little while. He's a similar build. Kyle Gibson was 6'6", 200 pounds. Kade Morris is like 6'3", like 170 pounds. They're both like kind of taller, skinnier, right-handed sinker ballers. And Kyle Gibson at his best was an innings eater that would throw close to 200 innings a year and just be a solid mid-rotation to back of the rotation starter. So that's what I think Cade Morris can do. And I just wanted to touch on him a little bit today because I think he's kind of the forgotten man in the A's organization from a pitching standpoint. But I do think he profiles really, really well as the type of arm that can have success in Sacramento and moving forward in Vegas. So I want to make sure I talked about him a little bit on here. Another guy I wanted to touch on was Shotaro Morii. he's gotten a lot of attention because obviously he's signed as a high schooler from Japan, which is incredibly rare. He also has the two-way thing. I don't think that's real. I don't think he's going to pitch beyond this year. I think his future is as a second baseman, but like a left-handed power hitting second baseman. I haven't seen him play in games at all because he was in the AZL. I've just watched him play, or just watched a couple videos of him and stuff. But the swing looks good. He's kind of like this stockier build. He obviously has a strong arm. That's why he's getting a chance to pitch a little bit. But the left-handed swing looks good. And what he did in the ACL last year as an 18-year-old coming over from Japan was pretty impressive. He hit 258 with 3 home runs, a 783 OPS. He had a 399 on base percentage. He drew 36 walks, which shows there's a good approach there and there's some good pitch recognition there to build off of. This is a guy who hit like 50 home runs in high school in Japan too. So this is a guy with real power from the left side. And he's a guy I'm super excited to watch in Stockton this year. I'll probably tune into some Stockton games early in the year specifically just to watch this guy play a little bit. I do think there's upside. He is so far away from the big league, so it's tough to project exactly what he's going to be. But he's a really exciting player, and he also just like him being part of this organization points to the A's getting creative and looking everywhere for baseball talent. High schoolers from Japan never sign with Major League Baseball teams out of high school. And he did. The A's have also signed guys from Taiwan, like Wei-En Lin. They've signed guys from Cuba, like Luis Morales. They're looking everywhere to find talent, and they're getting creative with the guys they're offering. And because of that, they're getting really good players in the organization that have a chance to make an impact long term. So my comp for Shotaro Morii is Brandon Lau, the left-handed second baseman from the Rays who was traded to the Pirates this offseason. That's kind of what I see from Morii, is like an average defensive second baseman, but a guy with left-handed power that can impact the lineup. That's what I'm hoping to see. Again, the pitching thing, I just don't think you have to be so elite at both of those things for that to last. And I really think he showed a lot with the bat, where it's going to be tough for him to show enough on the pitching side to want to take away from the development of the bat, is kind of how I look at it. But he's a guy I'm really curious about, really excited to watch. And I do think there's like a power hitting second baseman that can develop. And I mean, it's years away, but he's going to be a really, really fun player to watch the rest of the year. And then my last guy, the guy who I'm really excited to watch on the pitching standpoint, is Zane Taylor. So Zane Taylor was drafted in the 5th round last year out of UNC Wilmington. He's ranked 19th on their prospect list by MLB.com. And what people don't know about him is he was one of the best college pitchers in the country last year. He had an absolutely dominant senior season. Usually when you're a senior and you get drafted, you sign for well under slot because you don't have any leverage. They know you're not going to go back to school. So they'll draft you in the 5th round. They'll offer you about half of what the signing slot is for that, and you'll sign. They signed Zane Taylor for full slot as a senior sign, which is really rare, and it shows that a lot of teams wanted him in the draft around the 5th round. So he was a highly coveted guy, and the book on him is he's a big-time strike thrower that really competes, really fills up the strike zone. He led NCAA baseball in strikeout to walk rate last year. I think he was either first or second in whip as well. So this is a guy that absolutely dominated college baseball, and he did it by throwing a ton of strikes. Now, he was advertised as like a low 90s fastball, a decent changeup, and then the breaking stuff is just kind of whatever. But that low 90s fastball, when he was in AAA last year, and MLB.com commented on this, like the velo was higher than the A's expected. It's definitely higher than what I expected. And so he was a guy that was more mid-90s and touched as high as 98. And I do think that changes the profile a little bit on him. I also saw him throw in spring training. It's like a super athletic delivery. I love these undersized right-handers that are super athletic and super competitive. That's just one of my biases when I'm watching. And he just fits that profile really, really well. And so he's a guy I'm super excited to watch, especially if that fastball velocity holds and he's throwing more mid-90s, and then there's a good changeup. The breaking stuff is behind, and it's probably going to stay behind. It's really if you have below average breaking stuff, it's tough for that to take a jump from below average to above average. Maybe they can get that to average. And I do think that limits his ceiling. Like, I don't think this is a future number one starter. He's also 23 years old. So, like, he's 3 years older than Wei-En Lin, who already pitched at Double-A. So he's a little bit older. He's undersized. The breaking stuff's not great. But I think there's a really good chance this guy develops into a back end of the rotation starter, like a 4 or 5 starter that eats innings, that is super competitive, and that is a guy that I would really enjoy watching. So my comp for him, I love this comp. I don't think it's a perfect comp because the stuff is a little different. And I haven't seen Zane Taylor throw enough to know exactly what the stuff is going to be like. But when I think of an undersized righty that dominated college baseball, that fell a little bit in the draft because of questions about size and stuff, but is like this ultra competitive, ultra athletic small righty, I think of Tim Hudson. And Tim Hudson was my favorite player growing up. I think this guy could be like a poor man's Tim Hudson. And if that's the case, he's going to be one of my favorite players moving forward. So those are my thoughts on the prospect list. I'm excited about these top 30 guys. I really do think the A's have a top 30 that is going to be really fun moving into this year. I think there's a lot of these guys that are going to impact the major leagues this year. I didn't even talk about Jamie Arnold, Gage Jump, Braden Nett, all these guys, but the A's have a lot of talent. And if you compare that upper level minors pitching talent with the offense they already have, I think they're going to be really, really fun to watch. So that's what I got for you guys today. Again, these prospects are then the prospect list are just something I kind of nerd out over. So I wanted to make sure I touched on that, shared my thoughts on some of these guys. One quick note, Zane Taylor, I think that's a not no doubt. That's not the right phrase. I think he is a really good bet to win the A's minor league pitcher of the year this year because he's a guy that's definitely going to be in the minors this year. I think he's going to start out in high A, and I think he's going to dominate high A, move up to Double-A, and hold his own. I think guys like Gage Jump might move into the big leagues early enough where they're not going to be in consideration for minor league pitcher of the year. Wei-En Lin is going up to a higher level that he hasn't pitched at, so I expect there to be some level of growing pains. And Jamie Arnold, we just haven't seen him pitch in pro ball yet. But Zane Taylor's a guy where I look at him and I'm like, hey, I think this guy is going to be their minor league pitcher of the year. I think he's going to throw 150 innings in the minor leagues. I think he's going to do that with an ERA in the mid threes, and I think he's going to be a really fun guy to watch. So that's my one take for this. Zane Taylor, lock it in, A's minor league pitcher of the year this year. But that's what I got for you guys today. This has been another episode of Where Stats Meet Instinct. Like, subscribe, do all that. I'm your host, Sam. You can find me on Twitter @StraightA's. But that's what I got for you tonight, guys. And as always, go A's.